There's a truth that kind-hearted people often don't want to admit. Not everyone deserves your kindness. Not everyone is grateful when you lift them up. And not everyone is simply hurting, like they claim, to hide their toxic behavior. Maybe you've been in relationships like that before, where you gave so much, but all you got in return was silence, indifference, or even manipulation, where you had to ask yourself, why do I always feel like I'm the one at fault, while the one who hurt me has never once apologized? Here's the scary part. Toxic people don't always show up with harsh words or unpleasant faces. Many of them walk into your life with a smile, with compliments, with what looks like unconditional care, until one day you slowly lose yourself in a nameless relationship, where you're always trying to become a version they approve of, just to be loved. And then one day, you look back and realize you've been living like someone under control, no longer yourself, afraid to speak your mind, unsure where the line is between kindness and blindness. The problem is, toxic people are masters of disguise. They don't hurt you with force, but with confusion. They don't yell at you. They just ask questions that make you doubt yourself. They don't tell you to stay, but make you feel irresponsible if you leave. They don't have to curse you. They just have to make you curse yourself. And then what happens? You start making excuses for them. You say, maybe they're under pressure. You think, maybe I'm too sensitive. You believe, if I just try a little harder, maybe they'll change. But that's the trap, because truly, toxic people don't want to change. They don't need your help. They just need you to stay long enough for them to keep feeding off you. And all of this, it's not rare. It's happening every day. In families, in workplaces, in love, in friendships, even in the communities you once thought were safe. And do you know what's the most cruel part? The one being manipulated is often the last to realize it's happening. So what does Stoicism say about all this? Stoic philosophy doesn't teach you to become hard, emotionless, or suspicious. On the contrary, it teaches you to become someone with sharp awareness and a soul that can't be easily led. Stoicism teaches you that not everyone deserves your trust, that walking away from a toxic relationship isn't selfish, it's a moral responsibility to yourself, that you have the right to choose who enters your mind like a gatekeeper, protecting a sacred temple. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Keep your mind clear and clean, for it is the place where your soul resides." A soul that's been manipulated can never see clearly, and someone who can no longer see clearly cannot live in alignment with their true values. So ask yourself this: when you're around that person, do you feel lifted or dragged down? Do you feel stronger or smaller? Do you feel clarity or constant confusion? Are you allowed to be yourself, or just a version of you that keeps them comfortable? If you're living in that fog, then this video is for you. Not to blame anyone, not to turn you against the world, but to open your eyes to signs that seem harmless but are quietly wearing you down, day by day. Stoicism doesn't exist to teach you how to be good. It exists to teach you how to stay awake, to know who deserves your kindness, and to be absolutely clear with who doesn't. In the next part, we'll go deeper into the specific signs of a toxic person, not to label anyone, but to help you look again at the relationships around you and reclaim something you may have lost long ago: the right to live in peace. Are you ready? If you're still here, I know a part of you has already begun to question that something isn't quite right in the way they treat you. And sometimes, all it takes is starting from that one doubt to finally save yourself. There's a paradox no one ever taught you growing up. The kindest people are often the ones who get hurt the most. Don't believe it. Think about this. The ones who always forgive are often the ones most deeply wounded. The ones who are empathetic often get taken advantage of by those who feel no gratitude. The ones who always consider others are the ones most likely to be labeled too sensitive or too weak. And the ones who always want to keep the peace are often pushed to the point of suffocation. Why? Because you believe that if you're good enough, people will naturally change. Because you want to preserve the relationship even if you're the only one trying. Because you think it's not worth making a fuss, afraid of upsetting others, being misunderstood, or being called difficult. And because you were raised with a flawed moral model, giving unconditionally is always good. Keeping quiet is wisdom. Good people don't hold grudges. To love is to endure. But Stoicism doesn't teach that. Stoic philosophy never encourages you to make yourself a victim. It teaches you to do the right thing, but in the right way, to be kind, but never let anyone walk all over you, to be compassionate, but never carry someone else's responsibilities, to be forgiving, but still know where to draw the line. You weren't born to let others distort your mind and call it family, love, or loyalty. You are here to become someone with inner strength, with awareness, and with the ability to protect yourself from those who wear morality like a mask just to manipulate. There's one thing almost all manipulated people have in common. They know they're being controlled, but they don't want to believe it. Because if they accept that the other person is toxic, then all the years of love feel wasted. All the hope that they'll change falls apart. All the times they stayed quiet, endured, waited, become meaningless. So they keep living with the same broken belief. I just need to be more patient. I just need to love a little more. I just need to try harder to please them. Until one day, they no longer recognize who they are. So what does Stoicism say in moments like this? It doesn't show up to pat you on the back and say, "Hang in there, they'll come around." It doesn't come to make you cold, emotionless, or suspicious. Stoicism shows up to reset your place in your own life, to remind you, you are not responsible for making others happy. You don't need to prove your worth through constant self-sacrifice. You are not obligated to stay in a relationship just because you've already given so much. And you don't have to keep enduring just because you're afraid of being seen as the bad guy. Being good doesn't mean you have to stay silent when you're hurt. Being gentle doesn't mean you have to forgive someone who never makes things right. And living with integrity doesn't mean you must exist to serve the needs of the ungrateful. A Stoic isn't someone cold. A Stoic is someone deeply awake. They don't judge others based on emotion. They observe. They take note. They watch behavior, not words. They don't react impulsively, but they don't allow themselves to be led blindly either. And once they see someone's true nature, they walk away, quietly, but decisively, because, to a Stoic, inner peace is more valuable than any relationship, and clarity of mind is the strongest armor against wounds that never needed to happen. I don't know where you are in your journey. Maybe you've started noticing that someone around you is draining you. Maybe you're still clinging to the hope that they'll understand one day. Or maybe you've grown so used to sacrificing that you can no longer tell the difference between love and emotional debt. But I want to ask you one very simple, honest question. Who are you trying to become? Someone who always pleases others and quietly collapses in loneliness? Or someone clear-minded who knows their limits, chooses who enters their inner world, and holds their center through every storm? Only you can answer that. In the next part, I'll walk you through 8 of the clearest signs, so you can immediately recognize when someone is manipulating you, harming you, or pulling you downward. Not to label anyone, not to judge, but to give you a solid foundation so you can make the right decisions for yourself. Because sometimes all it takes is one early realization to escape years trapped in an emotional cage. Will begin in the next part. And I promise, after this, you won't look at your relationships the same way again. There's a simple truth that often gets overlooked. The most dangerous people aren't the ones who shout at you. They're the ones who make you stop trusting yourself. A harsh comment might make you angry, but a sweet-sounding sentence laced with manipulation, that makes you feel like you're the one at fault. And that's how they control you, not through power, but through guilt. In this part, we'll go through the first 4 signs. The ones that aren't loud or obvious, but are incredibly dangerous, because they creep into your mind quietly. Sign 1. Their words and actions never match. They say, "I respect you," but they constantly put you down in front of others. They say, "I trust you," but they monitor your messages, your decisions, even how you dress. They say exactly what you want to hear because they know you're waiting to hear it. But if you watch closely, their actions always tell a different story. And here's the dangerous part. When you call them out, they flip it around and make you feel like you're the problem. Too sensitive, too dramatic, overthinking again. You start asking yourself, am I just imagining things? Am I being ungrateful? This is classic manipulation, making you doubt your own perception. But a Stoic does the opposite. They don't judge someone by what they say, but by what they consistently do. Epictetus once said, "Don't let smooth words blind. You watch what they actually do." The more someone has to explain their behavior, the more you should be watching, not trusting. Sign 2. They always make you feel not enough. No matter how much you try, they'll always find something to criticize. You get complimented at work, they say. Just lucky, not skill. You buy something new, they smile. Looks good on you, though most people wouldn't wear that. You share a dream, they frown. That's hard. Don't get your hopes up. And suddenly, you're living in emotional grey space. One moment you're praised, the next, you're made small. Sometimes they admire you. Other times, they call you too fragile. This isn't random. It's a psychological tactic to make you depend on their approval. The more they put you down, the more you try to prove yourself. The more you try, the more control they gain. And you get caught in a loop. Try hard, feel, let down, apologize, try harder. A Stoic would ask, why are you letting your self-worth depend on someone else's ever-changing mood? You weren't born to be someone's emotional game. You're here to live in alignment with your true values. And no one has the right to make you feel less just because they can't control you anymore. Sign 3. They use guilt to manipulate you. Toxic people rarely demand things directly. Instead, they plant guilt. And if you don't go along, you're made to feel like the bad one. They say, you know I'm sensitive, and yet you still said that. Or, if I didn't care about you, I wouldn't be so upset. Or, all I need is for you to be there, and even that's too much for you. Over time, you stop saying no. Not because they force you, but because you don't want to feel like a selfish person. That's the peak of manipulation. They don't need to pressure you. They just stand back and let you punish yourself for hurting them. A Stoic would remind you, you are not responsible for someone else's happiness, especially if it means betraying yourself. True love doesn't come with guilt trips. And if you always feel like you owe that person, that's not love. That's an emotional trap. Sign 4. They never take responsibility. When you give feedback, they get angry. When you raise a concern, they flip it back on you. When something goes wrong, they blame the situation, the world, everyone except themselves. You'll always be the one apologizing. They'll always be the victim. And worst of all, you'll start believing you're the problem. This is the most dangerous type of person because they can't grow. They can't change because they never admit they're wrong. And if you stay close long enough, you'll lose your ability to tell right from wrong, real from fake. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "He who constantly denies his faults lives without a guiding light, and if you walk beside him, you too will wander in darkness." Real maturity begins with the ability to say, "I was wrong." If they can't ever say that, then you'll never be able to build something real with them. Do you recognize a familiar face behind these signs? You don't have to rush to answer. Just pause and observe more clearly. In the next part, we'll explore 4 more signs, subtler, more hidden but just as dangerous. And I'll show you how a Stoic responds when they see someone's true nature without losing their dignity or their inner peace. There's something strange about human nature. We often realize toxicity only after we've been deeply hurt. We hear our intuition, yet we silence it. We see all the signs but still say, "They didn't mean to." In the previous part, you saw the quiet signs like tiny thorns slowly digging into your everyday moments. Now, we move into the final 4 signs, clearer, deeper, and if you see them around you, this is no longer a suspicion, it's a warning. Sign 5, subtle jealousy. They're never truly happy for you. Toxic people are never genuinely happy when you succeed. They might clap, they might congratulate you, but then they'll add something to make you second-guess yourself. Probably just lucky. Anyone could have done that. Impressive. But let's see how long it lasts. They won't stop you from rising, but they'll quietly pull your spirit down. Because deep down, your success is a mirror reflecting the failure they try to hide. Instead of learning from it, they choose to criticize, minimize, or cast doubt. Because if they can get you to doubt yourself, they won't have to look at their own reflection. A Stoic sees this quickly, because a Stoic doesn't wait for applause to know they're on the right path. If something comes from genuine effort, it doesn't need validation from people secretly threatened by your growth. If someone makes you feel like you have to dim your light to keep them comfortable, you're slowly killing a part of yourself, just to keep a relationship that's already dying. Sign 6, disguised control. They support you while holding you back. This is the person who wears the mask of love. I'm saying this because I care. They tell you to give up your dream because it's unrealistic. They say you should stay where you are because change is risky. They often remind you, "I only want what's best for you." It sounds caring, but if you look closely, you always feel smaller around them. You find yourself holding back when talking about your wins. You feel the need to ask permission for your own decisions. You begin to lose your sense of ownership over your life. They don't yell. They don't demand. They just make you believe, if I don't follow them, I'm being selfish. That's not support. That's emotional manipulation dressed up as family or friendship. And these are the hardest relationships to walk away from. Marcus Aurelius once warned, "The dangerous one isn't the person who knocks you down. It's the one who makes you think that standing up is wrong." Sign 7. You feel tense around them. For no clear reason. This one is simple but easily ignored. You don't know exactly why, but every time you're about to see them, your stomach tightens. You don't feel safe being honest. You find yourself performing a version of yourself just to keep the peace, and afterward you always feel exhausted. Not from fighting, but from holding yourself back the whole time. That's your body and subconscious sending you a message. You can't keep pretending around someone who only accepts the watered-down version of you. A Stoic listens to that signal, not to judge quickly, but to pause and study each behavior and emotion with clarity. Stoicism doesn't ask you to cut off emotion. It teaches you to read your emotions like a map, so you don't get lost. Sign 8. They lack basic empathy for your pain. No matter how hurt you are, they barely care. Or worse, they act like you're exaggerating. You say, "That really hurt me." They say, "Seriously, you're upset over that." You share a deep loss. They immediately shift the conversation to their story, as if your pain is just a side note. They don't listen to understand. They listen to argue, dismiss, or prove themselves right. And the scariest part is, they feel no guilt. This is a sign of someone who fundamentally lacks compassion, and if you stay too long, you'll slowly adopt that numbness. You'll shrink your emotional needs. You'll stop speaking your truth, and you'll become invisible in your own life. A Stoic doesn't expect perfection, but they won't walk alongside someone who can't even see the pain of another, because a relationship without empathy always becomes a battlefield in silence. These 8 signs are not for you to label others as bad or toxic. They are for you to look inward. How much of yourself have you had to shrink just to keep a relationship that's no longer healthy? How many times have you defended someone, but never once stood up for your own feelings? How long have you been the reasonable one, while slowly losing the voice inside you? In the next part, I'll share a real story of someone who lived in the grip of manipulation for years and how he broke free, not through revenge, but through awareness. That's when Stoicism stops being a philosophy and becomes a path to healing. Elias was a quiet man. He wasn't the kind who stood out in a crowd. But if you ever had the chance to work with Elias, you'd notice something. He always kept his word. He always listened. He was always ready to help, often more than what people even asked for. Someone once said, "Elias is the kind of person you can truly trust." And they were right. But it was that very purity in Elias that made him the perfect target for a toxic relationship. Her name was Mara. When they first met, Mara left a strong impression. Intelligent, ambitious, full of fire. Elias admired that. He thought, maybe this time I found someone to walk a long road with. Mara didn't control Elias with obvious demands. She changed him slowly through guilt. When Elias had plans with friends, Mara would text, "Go ahead, I'll be fine." But her voice felt heavy. Silence followed. And the next day, the Cold War began without explanation. When Elias had a chance at a promotion, Mara said, "I don't want to hold you back. I just worry, if you become too successful, you might change." And so Elias said no, not because Mara forbade it, but because he wanted to keep the peace, even if that peace was just the silence of someone satisfied with having control. Gradually, Elias fell into a familiar pattern, always doing things based on Mara's moods to avoid conflict, always reading her emotions instead of speaking his truth, always blaming himself instead of questioning the fairness of their relationship. She never admitted she was wrong. She was always the one hurt. She cried. Elias apologized. She got upset. Elias made up for it. She pulled away. Elias came chasing, and whenever Elias thought of leaving, Mara would pull him back with a single question, "But what about everything we've built together?" Until one day, Elias met an old friend. Nothing special, just a casual conversation. But in those short 15 minutes, Elias felt something he hadn't felt in years. The freedom to be himself. He laughed freely, without checking the other person's face. He said what he truly felt without fearing it would be twisted. He didn't feel the need to shrink or perform. And when he returned home and looked into Mara's eyes, he suddenly realized he had been living like a man begging for peace, not like someone who was truly in love. Elias didn't leave right away. He didn't slam doors, didn't shout, didn't end it in a fight, because that's not the Stoic way. He simply began to do something small but powerful. He observed. No more justifying. No more making excuses. No more blaming himself before anyone else could. He just watched silently each action, each reaction, each contradiction. And when the truth became clear enough, he knew he couldn't stay. Not out of hatred, not for revenge, but simply because he had awakened. Mara cried, Mara blamed. Mara tried every tactic she used before. I changed so much for you. You never really tried to understand me. If you leave, you won't survive. But Elias didn't react the same way. He wasn't hard-hearted, but he was unmoved. Because for the first time in many years, Elias placed his hand on his heart and asked, Am I truly living according to my values? Am I still myself in this relationship? Am I loving or just surviving in a cycle of guilt? The breakup wasn't clean. It wasn't easy. Toxic relationships always leave behind a mess, like a room cluttered with things no one ever cleaned up. But Elias didn't look at the mess. He walked away, not with bitterness, but with clarity, and that is one of the greatest gifts Stoicism gives a person: clarity of mind. Not every goodbye is a victory, but some departures are a form of salvation. Months later, Elias returned to his work, his friends, new relationships. But something had changed entirely. He no longer lived to please others. He no longer feared being misunderstood. He no longer accepted any relationship that required him to trade his clarity for so-called love. Elias had learned something. Not everyone gets to learn in time. Toxic people don't always have to change, but you can change who you allow into your life. That is freedom. That is power. And that is the Stoic path. Are you an Elias in some relationship in your life? You don't need to make any big decision just yet. Just start with one honest question. Am I shrinking myself to keep a relationship that no longer deserves me? If the answer is yes, remember, you don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to rage to be seen. You just need to pause, observe, and walk away when you've seen enough. In the next part, we'll break down the exact manipulation tactics that toxic people use, and more importantly, how Stoicism can help you resist them while staying calm, compassionate, and true to yourself. You've walked through the signs. You've seen the shape of manipulation: control, disguised as concern; envy, disguised as care. You've also heard the story of Elias, not a helpless victim, but a man who had sacrificed so much, he almost lost himself. And maybe now, you're starting to ask yourself, how do I walk away from a toxic relationship without losing my kindness? How do I remain compassionate without becoming easy to exploit? How do I break free from manipulation, yet still live with dignity and awareness? That is where Stoicism enters. Stoicism isn't just a philosophy to read in your spare time. It's a way to live. A map for the inner world, especially when you're at rock bottom and still want peace. It doesn't teach you to become cold. It teaches you to stop reacting blindly when provoked. So what does a Stoic do when facing a toxic person? Not walk away immediately, not shout for justice, and certainly not play the same power game in reverse. A Stoic will recognize without judgment, observe without reacting, set boundaries without apologizing, withdraw if necessary, without guilt. That is self-mastery. No one can take that from you unless you give it away. Recognize with reason, not emotion. You can't escape manipulation if you're still trying to change the one who's manipulating you. You won't be able to stop if you're still clinging to the hope that they'll change someday. Stoics don't suppress emotion. They simply don't let emotion dictate their choices. You may still care, but you can still walk away when that care costs you your own self. Epictetus once said, When someone does wrong, don't think of them as evil just as someone who doesn't yet understand, but that doesn't mean you must let them keep doing wrong to you. Observe instead of react. Toxic people thrive by making you react. They provoke, push, argue, confuse, and before you know it, you're drained. But if you stop reacting, they lose control. If you simply observe, note, and stay silent when needed, they begin to lose their grip. This isn't the silent treatment. It's the power of someone who's no longer shaken by someone else's chaos. When you stop reacting just to please them, pacify them, or avoid another Cold War, you're withdrawing your energy from a game you no longer want to play. Set boundaries with clarity. A Stoic doesn't need to raise their voice to protect themselves. They only need to say, once, and clearly, I don't agree with that. That makes me uncomfortable. I choose not to engage in this kind of conversation, and then act in alignment with those words. Toxic people often test you. They cross small lines to see if you'll push back. They hurt you, then wait to see if you'll come back, like nothing happened. They expect you to apologize, even when they're the one at fault. The softer you are, the more they'll push. A Stoic understands this principle. Boundaries are what you set, not what you wait for others to respect. If you don't draw the line, they'll step over it. If you draw it but don't uphold it, it will no longer mean anything. Withdraw without resentment. Leaving a toxic person isn't a failure. It's a quiet victory. A victory over the weakness that once kept you stuck. Money don't walk away, not because they don't know better, but because they don't want to be seen as the one who gave up. But your highest duty isn't to your reputation. It's to your peace of mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "If something repeatedly disturbs your peace, you have no obligation to continue enduring it, except through foolishness." Stoicism doesn't teach you to be a warrior against others. It teaches you to be a gatekeeper of your mind, strong enough to not let the wrong things in. And once you begin practicing Stoicism in a toxic relationship, you'll realize you don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to win the argument. You don't need others to finally understand you. You don't need to shout to defend the truth. You just need to be awake. And still, like a stone in the storm, all manipulation will pass. All threats will lose meaning, because you are no longer controlled by a desire for validation from someone who never deserved your trust. In the next part, we'll walk back through all 8 signs, but this time through the lens of clarity, and I'll leave you with a question that might just shift the path ahead. Will you choose to remain controlled, or will you rise to protect your own mind? Now that you've nearly reached the end of this journey, I want you to pause for a moment. Take a deep breath, not to search for something new, but to reflect and truly see what? See all the signs you once dismissed as no big deal, as maybe I'm overthinking, as it's not that bad, when in truth, they were slowly eating away at you. Let me repeat them, not to scare you further, but to ensure you never look away again. Sign 1. They say one thing, but do another. You're caught between their words and their actions because they never match. Someone who can't be honest with themselves will never be honest with you. Sign 2. They make you feel not enough. No matter how much you give, you still feel guilty. That's not love. That's a game where you're never meant to win. Sign 3. They make you feel guilty for being your true self. They don't need to cage you, because you've already imprisoned yourself in shame. Sign 4. They never take responsibility, and somehow you've become the one carrying the weight they refuse to bear. Sign 5. They envy your light. Every time you shine, they make you question your own glow. Sign 6. They control you under the guise of care. No one who truly loves you will ask you to trade your inner freedom to stay. Sign 7. You feel tense around them. Your body knows the truth, even if your mind is still trying to ignore it. Sign 8. They lack empathy completely, and so you slowly learn to stay silent because no one's truly listening anymore. If you recognize yourself in 3, or even all of these signs, then maybe it's time for a serious conversation, not with them, not with the one who hurt you, but with your own inner self, the part of you still waiting to be seen and protected. Ask yourself slowly and honestly, am I still myself in this relationship? Am I truly living, or just trying not to upset anyone? Am I silent out of wisdom or out of fear? A Stoic doesn't fear the truth, even when it hurts, because only by looking it in the eye can we move forward without being led blindly. You may still care, you may have made mistakes, you may have hoped, forgiven, waited, but don't let your compassion become an excuse for someone else to repeat the same harm. Stoicism reminds you, you can't control others, but you can control how you respond. You can't change someone, but you can stop enabling their destruction. You can't force others to understand you, but you can live in integrity with what you understand. And above all, you have the right to withdraw your energy from what no longer deserves it. True love doesn't leave you lost. True friendship doesn't make you shrink. True family doesn't demand you live in fear and guilt. If a connection is slowly killing your trust, your dignity, your peace, then it's no longer love. It's attachment. It's dependence. It's a prison. Don't confuse Stoicism with coldness. Stoicism is compassion toward yourself first. If you don't know how to protect yourself, who will? If you don't set the boundary, you'll always be moved by someone else's emotions. You don't need revenge. You don't need to explain. You don't need to hold on. You just need to rise and walk away from what no longer honors your goodness. No noisy, no hatred, just this quiet truth. Enough. In the next and final part, I won't say much. I simply want to sit with you in stillness, to end, not with condemnation, but with a quiet vow between you and yourself. Because you weren't born to live small. You're here to become a soul that is steady, clear, and no longer easily manipulated. You've just gone through nearly 60 minutes. Not to find a reason to hate anyone, not to become suspicious, or to build emotional walls around yourself. You walked through this journey to remember one thing: you have the right to peace, and more than a right, it is a responsibility, because if you don't protect the peace within you, there will always be someone who walks in and places their anxieties, their manipulation games, their control disguised as love on top of it. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this video, let it not be hyper-vigilance. Let it be a quiet light inside, the light of clarity, the light of someone who doesn't need to shout, doesn't need to prove, but knows exactly where they stand and who truly deserves to walk with them. Stoicism doesn't teach you how to be loved by everyone. It teaches you not to trade your clarity for approval. It doesn't promise success in others' eyes. It teaches you to be honest with your own. After this video, you might find yourself reflecting on a few relationships in your life, and you may start to see the things you once overlooked, the things you once justified, the truths you once buried just to keep going. That's okay. Realizing late is still better than never seeing at all, because every time you dare to see clearly, you reclaim another part of your soul's freedom. You may have to walk away from some people. You may go through a season where no one truly understands you. You may feel lonely, no longer surrounded by those who once made you feel seen. But please remember, loneliness in awareness is far lighter than loneliness next to someone toxic, Because when you're still under their manipulation, even being held feels cold. Even being called lover, best friend, family, feels like you're disappearing a little more each day. So start with one small thing today. Stop asking for permission to be yourself. Stop waiting for someone to validate your feelings. Stop bowing just to stay in the life of someone who never truly tried to understand you. And if someone makes you feel like you should always apologize for being real, then walk away. Gently, without rage, without dramatic farewells, just with this quiet knowing, I am no longer the version of myself that could be so easily controlled. Your kindness is precious. Don't place it in the wrong hands. Your gentleness is strength, but without boundaries, it becomes a gift wasted on those who don't value it. And your goodness is not meant to be mined. You weren't born to be the one who pleases everyone. You're here to be a person of clarity, of courage, not one manipulated by misguided love. If someone once made you believe, maybe I'm too sensitive, maybe I need to try harder, maybe I need to change to be accepted, then please remember, you don't have to become someone else just to remain in the life of someone who doesn't see your true worth. Just return to yourself, sit down, and listen to the voice you were once forced to silence. When you begin to live in alignment with your inner truth, toxic people will feel threatened. They'll say you've changed. They'll call you cold, selfish, distant. Let them, because real peace isn't about keeping others happy. It's about no longer letting anyone else define your value. If you're still here, I know something inside you has awakened, something that no longer wants to live in the fog of blurred emotions, something that wants to live clearly, with boundaries, with intention, like someone truly grown. And that is the essence of Stoicism. Not to be the best at arguing, but to no longer be easily led, simply because you lacked awareness. If you need one final reminder, this is what I want to say. You deserve a life where you don't have to shrink, just to be loved. If a relationship is demanding that you trade away your peace, it's not worth keeping. And if you still don't know what to do next, just start with something small. Be silent at the right time. Observe more deeply and reclaim your energy from the places that are draining your spirit. No one can live your life for you, and no one has the right to define you, but you. If anything you've heard touched something deep inside, let it settle, and if fate allows, we'll meet again on another path of awakening. Peace is real, but it's not found everywhere. It's reserved for those brave enough to walk away from what no longer honors their heart.